All right, you've heard about the Basic Education Laws Amendment Bill, also known as the BELA Bill. We've covered it here on the show, but it does seem that there still needs to be a lot of focus on what exactly is this bill, how will it impact the basic education sector, some understanding also required from some of, you tonight as you've been raising some of the questions here. So let's speak to Professor Mary Metcalfe, who's an education specialist and at UJ School of Public Management, Governance and Public Policy there. Thank you so much, Mary, for your time. A number of the viewers have been asking a lot of questions because we would talk about the bill and taking advantage that people do understand what we're talking about. But what do we mean when we talk about the BELA Bill?
Well, what we have on the statute books at the moment, that is the law that regulates how we approach basic education, is the South African Schools Act. And the South African Schools Act was passed in 1996. Now, I'm mentioning that, Bongiwe, because what's interesting is that some of the matters that have caused a public furore have been in the law since 1996, but we can come back to that. Now, with all laws, they need periodically to be updated. And the DBE has been in a long process over about 10 years of updating the South African Schools Act, partly because there was a division of the Department of Education into higher education and basic education. So this is a law that's focused on basic education, and it's an amendment because it's amending the original South African Schools Act. So Basic Education Laws Amendment. Now, the other thing that perhaps not everybody knows is that before a law is passed by both houses of Parliament, it's called a bill. It's, I suppose, comes from the legal practices in countries like England, but at the moment it's a bill. It has been passed by the House of by Parliament, and it's still got to go through the National Council of Provinces. Once it's been through the National Council of Provinces, it will be the Basic Education Laws Amendment Act, and it will be the law of the country replacing the South African Schools Act of 1996.
And listening to, some of the interactions in Parliament over this and over time, some are of the view that it's aimed at improving governance issues in schools as well as enhance the quality of management. Is it?
It's doing many things. And, I've found lots of the debate very puzzling. There are, I think, probably three categories of concerns that people have directed to me, that I've been asked questions about, that I see in the media. There's firstly a huge amount of misinformation. Now, the misinformation ranges from the teachers may now teachers are forced to take school learners, girl children, to get abortions if they want them. There is nothing like that in the legislation. So there's a lot of misinformation. There's misinformation about the comprehensive sexuality. There's misinformation, and I don't know who spreads all of that misinformation, and I'm going to come back to that. Then I've seen lots of concerns about education, where people might, for example, say our class sizes are too big. Now, those may be substantive, and there may be real concerns of teachers and of communities. But that isn't what's covered by law. It's covered by policy, it's covered by the procedures outlined in policy, it's covered in terms of how much money is available. What's in a law sets out what Parliament, after consultation, believes that all citizens need to comply with. Now, if you put aside what I think is the frivolous misinformation, and I don't know why that it's there, and you put aside concerns which may be justifiable but shouldn't be addressed in legislation, you're left with some substantive matters, which I think do need more public debate.
And let's stay with that, that point that you've raised around the promotion of comprehensive sexual education, because it's been one of the big talking points from a number of people who've been saying that it's going to promote this and there's going to be huge problems in schools. So is it?
Well, it's I'll tell you, one of the things that's fascinating to me about this whole process is in the age of social media and access to the internet, the kind of WhatsApp campaigning has been huge. It's been viral. But people aren't actually just going to websites to inform themselves. Now, comprehensive sexuality education has been in the curriculum since the year 2000. I went onto the DBE website to see what a person would see on the website. Now, the comprehensive sexuality education is all about building young people's confidence to be able to manage what it means to be a sexual being, to be ready for participating in, well, not participating, but perhaps for many girls being the object of sexual jokes, of harassment. So it's not all about teaching about sex. It's teaching about bullying. It's teaching about self-respect. It's teaching about gender and power relations. It's teaching about a whole range of attitudes and behaviors that young men and women need to be able to understand in order to conduct themselves. Through adolescence and early adolescence, they become sexual beings. And we've seen this huge increase in teenage pregnancies, and I think it's very important that young people are able to be assertive, to understand protection, understand HIV, understand how they need to respect themselves, plan their futures, and not be subjected to what comprehensive sexuality education includes as positive peer pressure, negative peer pressure. It's everything that so many people are asking that our schools should do to support young women in particular, and the practices of young men who are often the ones who are complicit in the harassment of girls.
And it's quite an interesting one, because you think about the fact that the Western Cape government, for example, saying that it strongly opposes the bill, especially the admissions and language policy, then in particular calling them irrational as well as unconstitutional. What BELA says about language policy is consistent with what was in the South African Schools Act, which is that the school governing body is the group that determines the language policy of a school. Now, that is something that is probably unusual across different countries. Language policy would often be determined centrally. The reason we have that provision is to accommodate our very multilingual society. What that means in practice is that a school governing body can say, in this community, we are all Siswati speaking, and this is going to be a Siswati medium school, all the way through primary school and high school. That isn't happening. Mostly, schools are using the first language for the first 3 years and often then transition to an additional language for the years after that. But it's possible for a school to say, we're going to be using this medium of instruction, one of our many South African languages. Now, what's different about BELA and what will soon be the Act is that there have been difficult situations where you have more than one language group in a community, or you have people with different languages wanting to attend a school. If a school has room and the demographics of this feeder area of the school has changed, it is possible through BELA for the
provincial head of the education department, working through the officials, but finally the head of department, to consult with the school governing body and say, you've said as the parent governing body that this school should be a Siswati school, but we know that there's large numbers of isiZulu-speaking children as it happens in this area. Is it not possible that we have some isiZulu classes and some Siswati classes so that we optimally use the resources of the school? That is to do with the fact that government has a responsibility, because education is compulsory, to ensure that all learners get access to the years of compulsory education. The resources that the state has are the public schools. If a public school is not fully utilized and there are children who need to be taught in a different language who can be accommodated in that school, then it is possible for the head department and the officials to talk to the school governing body. Finally, after that consultation, BELA makes it possible for the head of department to make a ruling. But there are so many checks and balances in BELA that make sure that the rights of the school governing body are taken into account in public schools.
What an interesting conversation, and I do hope that our viewers were able to get as much as they could from that, because it does kind of clarify some of the issues here, and I hope we have more of this conversation, because it is very important to try and help everybody understand the misinformation, understand some of the concern areas, and for them to get a sense of how things are likely to work. Here, Mary, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. That was Professor Mary Metcalfe, Education Specialist.